Males, that's right. That's right.
All right, I have 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order this March 12, 2024 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Town of White Lake. And at this time, would ask you bow your heads for the invocation. Dear Lord, we wish to thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather here this evening to discuss the business of our town. We would ask that you guide us and direct us as we attempt to do your will and to do those things which are in the best interest of the citizens of this town. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
The first item, and of course, everyone in the audience is welcome to join in. We always start each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll ask Jake to lead us in the pledge, if you would, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item that we have tonight on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda items. And before, I assume all of you have had an opportunity to review those. Any questions about any of the consent agenda items? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items consisting of items 1A through 1E. Yeah, we can. There is one thing, it's not an agenda supplemental, but just need to be aware that when we get to the last of the resolutions that are included under item 5, when we get to 5E, there was one of the items on the retention of records that was not placed into the agenda. We provided a copy for each of you, so you can have that when we reach that point. So with that being said, I would entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Next matter is a presentation by Ms. Cathy Kinlaw. Robert's at it again. He has done a terrific White Lake book that we on premises and still have sales of, and did a documentary along with that is very much treasured by, I think, everyone down here. And Cathy, we're delighted to have you here tonight. It's just always great when we've got our White Lake residents who do good, and your son certainly fits that. And so I'll recognize you to make your presentation at this time.
Thank you for letting me do this tonight. I'm happy to be here. It's good to see all of you. This wonderful community, and in particular, this town board, this assembly of community leaders, has supported our hometown son, Robert Kinlaw, with his video, filming his documentaries, his filmmaking in general. And I'm so appreciative of that. He had the good pleasure of having a North Carolina public television broadcast video show in 2015 about White Lake. You all know about that. You still support it. We still see banners and signs outside, and it's still available. He has had the opportunity to have a second video airing next Thursday, which is March 21st, on public television again. It is the story of Merle Fest. That is about Doc Watson. You may not remember Doc Watson, but your parents do, I'm sure. And his son Merle. And the name of the video is My Name is Merle. And there are some handouts going around now with a magnet on the back, so you can pop them on your refrigerator. This film won Best History Documentary at the Longleaf Filmmakers Festival. I'm trying to get the name correct. In last year at the North Carolina Museum of History. And then subsequently was reviewed by PBS and selected to be aired. So we're really excited about that. I wanted you to know because you are a part of who Robert is. Thank you for this time.
Kathy, there's some connection to, wasn't that sort of what, sort of loosely Mail Fest was based on?
Probably.
To some extent, we had that down here for a while. James Melvin put that on, and he was a big fan of Merle, and a lot of people around here were, and I know they used to have, then they call it Merle Fest in the mountains or in
Yes.
his area.
Yes, it's in
Yeah.
Wilkesboro.
Yeah.
And it's on the campus of the community college there.
Right.
So, and it's been, I guess it's 30 years old now. They attract tens of thousands of guests every year to that.
I can remember James talking about that at the time that he put on Mail Fest down here, because he was a big fan. So we've got that connection with it. Well, if you'll let us know when you find out when that's going to air and all, we would got it in here. Good,
And I think this is in your packet.
good.
And then everyone here has information about it. It premieres
Mhm.
next Thursday night
Oh,
at 10 p.m.,
right.
which we understand is a good time slot. A
Mhm.
little late for me, but then it re-airs for the next 4 days at other times. So I hope you will support Robert and watch it. It's a very entertaining video. The ending has just a great touch to it with an impromptu request. Robert asked a little boy to play the fiddle he had. And he did, and he closes the video with that, and it's pretty impressive. But also PBS monitors how often videos get watched. And so you can watch the White Lake video even now, and it helps keep it, because it runs in their archives online. So it helps to keep it
That's awesome.
in demand and gives it more opportunities to be reshown, which is good for us as a community.
And give Robert our congratulations. He does us proud.
Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you,
your
Mr.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, again, Kathy, thank you for coming tonight and presenting that to us. We appreciate it. Next are the administrative matters. We have several items under that, and Sean, at this time, I'll turn over the administrative matters to you. If you will present those, please.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to. The first administrative matter in your agenda packet is item A1. It's the White Lake Lake Water Management Project update. And Dr. Diane Lawrenson has provided her report, her monthly report to the board. And in this report, she does continue or makes notion that she is continuing to work with the Scientific Advisory Committee by in this month. I think they were looking at some groundwater flow, and she goes into that in her report here on what to know about groundwater flow interactions with White Lake. And there's a couple of things I'd draw your attention to. The sources of water supplying White Lake being rainfall and groundwater from the superficial or water table aquifer, which surrounds and underlines the lake. The next point I'd point out in this report is that the higher, the higher the water table level is above the lake level, the greater the hydraulic gradient, which is the driving force to move groundwater into the lake. In the report, there is a image here of the hydraulic gradient, and you can see through colors where the pressure is the highest, and of course where the water is moving. I would also state that this report is posted on whitelakewatch.com for those of you that are interested in seeing the graphics that I'm describing. The next point in her update talks about the high water table. It talks about the lake when there's a low water table. And then it talks about a condition known as flow through, which we see most commonly, where the water is higher on the eastern side of the lake and lower on the western side of the lake, which does result in inflow and outflow occurring or can occur at the same time. The last item in her report is flow from springs that are related to water table levels. And in this part, I wanted to point out to the board that she makes mention of the superficial aquifer being bisected by a clay hardpan layer in many areas, which creates a semi-confined cone in the aquifer below the clay. This is to say that the White Lake Springs are places where there is no hardpan clay layer. So when the water table levels are sufficiently higher than lake level flow from the deeper superficial aquifer can be visible as quote unquote boils of water which stir up the sand. And often the flow from these spring sites is not visible or detectable by temperature differences as much as it is by seepage that's sufficient to keep the sandy depressions clear of sediment buildup. And they are visible in these aerial photographs that are included in the report. Commissioner Hilton does have an update for the board tonight in reference to a meeting that took part with the state and the staff and members of the planning board. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hilton for that update.
So on February 21st, we had our second state meeting. This time, instead of us going to Raleigh, the state did come to White Lake and we visited areas around the lake, the drainage areas between Tim Clifton's house, the drainage area between 89's house and my house, and then how the system kind of runs from 701. At the meeting, and I'll tell you the folks that were there, just so everyone's aware, we had, of course, our town administrator, Sean Martin, myself, Timbo Blunt, Hope Campbell from the planning board, Lane Gardner from Singletary Lakes, Scott Avis, which is the South District Superintendent for the parks, Kathy Capps, which is the Deputy Director from State Parks, Julie Gerps, is that right?
Yep.
She's the Deputy Director from Division of Water Resources in Raleigh, the Director of Water Resources from Raleigh, Richard Rogers, and then Trent Allen with Water Quality. So we kind of moved with this second meeting being here. They've honestly, Julie was really just surprised at, the lake in general. I think it was great having her here, and Richard. They both have been very complimentary to how we could potentially get more funds to the lake. We talked about the hydrology study that, of course, the board's going to talk about tonight. We talked about long-term solutions for water clarity, which are maintenance ditches, basically where we would go and put gravel and riprap in a lot of the drainage areas coming to the lake. Of course, one of the problems, which y'all know, is White Lake does not own those maintenance areas. So I spent most of last week reaching out to the property owners, which have all but one agreed to allow us to riprap those areas and to try to bring about a mile of drainage in more cleanly to the lake. That's going to take some time. We've had Larry King and Brandon King. They met with Sean and myself. Was it Monday? Last Friday. They are doing the drawings. So we do have to draw the data plans. We have to get back to the state. We have to get permission to do it. But we will show the riprap kind of areas going into the lake. And then we will maintain the easements and get documentation to apply back to the state to allow us to do those additional clean water agreements. I don't think that it's going to be done quickly. I do think that we're moving in the right direction with the state and parks. But as you know, these are regulatory agencies, and so it takes time. We have Timbo and myself are actually able to meet with Charles Ray Peterson with the county, and they are open to budgeting some of the funds for us. Obviously, none of this stuff's cheap. So Sean met with Charles Ray last week as well, and is going to be putting together a plan to where we can request more grant funding from the county. We also have met with the county in our last study of baseball fields, softball fields, soccer fields, and the multi-use path. So they're open to partner with us as well to see if we can push some of that funding, along as well. Anything else I missed? Timbo? Sean, you want to add anything to it if I missed something?
I think you covered it well.
Yeah.
All right, if there are no questions from the board, that's the White Lake Management Project update this month. Our water AIA project update is short and sweet, and Again, the project continues to be on track. This project is an asset inventory assessment project. And just to remind the board, it is a planning grant utilized to pursue grant dollars to improve our water drinking system. You'll see the update here that we have worked on map books, which is a tremendous resource for the public works staff. As they're out in the field, they have a resource now to be able to determine where infrastructure is and make the necessary judgment calls and utilize their expertise to improve our system in real time. And we're also working on coordinating tank surveys for elevation data collection and hydraulic model creation. So all that is to say, it's just a synopsis of what's happening right now in the plan, and we still expect the plan to be done mid-fall of 2024, which that plan is funded entirely by grant dollars. For our fiscal year 2022 presentation, we have Thompson, Price, Scott, and Adams tonight, specifically Brian Scott here to present the findings of our audit. So, Mr. Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all again for the opportunity to be a part of the panel audit. And we are a little bit late, but we are here. We're in the audit that you got in front of you was approved by the ODC. I'm sorry you had it soon enough ahead of time to kind of go through, but I didn't want to meet next month, being like April 15th, so we're going to be done in March. Feel free to contact me. Be glad to talk to you anytime about the numbers, where they come from, how all of them. Like, thanks to Sean, Amber, and Mary Jo for getting in and getting us what we need to get things prepared for. So we're looking forward to next year. And just an update on that, we did get the Wilmington office to start that engagement for 2023, and I talked to them today. I think it's pretty much about to wrap up. So hopefully we'll have another presentation in the next 2 months. So you do have, of course, the bound copy, I think, in your agenda packet, but I've also done, as usual, this little summary sheet. So we're going to open that up to page 1, which is our independent audit report. I put this in there just to kind of lead off with our financial information, just so you can read it and see what our responsibilities are under professional standards. In addition to giving the opinion, which is an unmodified opinion, it's the highest opinion that we can render in such an engagement. Means we did not have to modify anything out of normal. We would get the financial statements that we have in front of us today. Now, looking over to page 4, that's the financial summary compared to 2021. You can see cash in the general fund unrestricted up to $1,573,000 over last year's $1,069,000. Restricted cash is $1,073,000 compared to $257,000 last year. That drop was 2021. You got $155,000 in the resiliency grant money. That was spent down a lot in the year in 2022. So that's the reason you see that fall. Revenues of $2.2 million, slightly above last year. Again, the resiliency grant did not come in, but your solid waste and some other revenues did increase for an overall revenue increase from last year. Looking at expenditures of $1.9 million, there were some increases over public safety, and there were some changes in the transportation department that lowered their costs. We did have a surplus of the year of $353,000 compared to last year's $394,000. That leaves fund balance of $1,870,000. You can see that the designations below reserved by state statute, reserved for Powell Hill, and then assigned for capital projects. And you know those are just capital projects y'all had every various number of years times. So undesignated is $1,009,000. If we look at the measuring stick that the local government used to have of 8%, you're well above that. You're in line with state. States used to be measured on population, now they're measured on the budget size. So y'all were just below that of 52.96 compared to 63 on state average. Now getting into the water and sewer funds, you see cash is $3.5 million over last year's 2.9, pretty big increase due to operational revenue surplus. Revenues $1,899,000, an increase $80,000 over last year. That mainly was due to water and sewer rates, I think, increased as well as just pure volume. Looking at expenditures, 1.2, slightly above last year's. Here again, you ended up with a surplus of $692,000. Keep in mind, this is on a GAAP measuring basis, county basis versus your budget. When you look at the budget, you did have a $668,000 surplus as well. So I commend you all, management and you, those in charge of governance and taking seriously to keep the financial condition of the town in check and having enough reserves for grants and other things that come in and the town was matched in addition to natural disasters. Just to wrap up, fund balance was $3 million available for appropriation in the water and sewer funds. The final part of the financial summary is the F1 collections. You can see the current year total value was $280 million, slightly above last year's I'll say last year, I'm sorry, it's 2021, so $2,279 million. Your tax collection rates are very good. They're right on the state average of 97.77%. So that's great for your tax department to be taking such a role and you can get people to pay the taxes. Flip over to page 5 and 6. These are just kind of bullet points of what we're required to talk to you about. Y'all are those in charge of government. You dealt with Sean, your management, and Amber and Mary Doug, and now we come to y'all with any issues. We tell y'all that, hey, we're providing reasonable assurance, but also we're not able to look at every transaction to provide absolute assurance. And we definitely want y'all to make sure that we're not looking at every transaction. We're doing samples. We're getting an idea of your internal control and planning our engagement, design what programs we want to do, or what are necessary. If we have any adjustments that we need to make to get with management, discuss those, all those that we did bring up to their attention this year, were the same ones we've had years in the past. I think I don't care now, we reviewed and approved them. Flipping over to that page 6, there were no difficulties, there were no documents, accounting policies. There were no, other than just being a little late, that was one of the difficulties we had. There were no disagreements, and as I mentioned, all the adjustments that we proposed were accepted and punched to your books. Flipping on to page 7. This is just other issues. As you recall, in the past, we had segregation of duties issues years ago, and we've got that resolved. I took that out of the audit, and now we got to bring that back. In addition to the timeliness of the audits, and as you have seen, your fund balance has been growing. It's still below state average, so we want to keep that on the top of everybody's list. But on page 8, this is our letter on internal control. You know, actually evaluate and test, and just gain an understanding of it. And then we'll come to you, any deficiencies or findings. We're going to bring that up in just a minute. There's one finding on internal control. Then the next letter on page 10 is our letter regarding your compliance with any major state grants. We did have one finding on that, and I'll bring it up in just a minute. So just read through these at your leisure. It's a lot of stuff I'm not going to waste everybody's time going through and reading. Just going to get the highlights. Page 13 to 14 is just a summary of our compliance and our review. We did have material weakness, we did have some deficiencies, and we did have some non-compliance. And we'll flip real quick to page 15. That's the material non-compliance. Of course, the statute required that all turned in by October 31st. Of course, we're 2 years, a year and a half late on that, so that is a deficiency that gets both on federal statutes. Number 16 is a deficiency regarding the NC Department of Environmental Quality. We are doing infrastructure work. There's a requirement when you get reimbursed, you've got 3 days to send that money out to the vendors due to whatever reasons. I think just timing of how things are going on in your finance department, and also understanding from the architect when and when to pay things. It went over 3 days, so that becomes a violation. What does that mean? You know, the grant's been signed off on. I don't think there's going to be any issues other than what do y'all do to resolve that from happening in the future. The other finding we've got is, and that's the reason we're here today, is that the financial record, the bank reconciliations were not being performed timely. That's been resolved. Y'all hire someone that's very capable. It's not saying that the ones that were there were not able to. It's just a series of events. And y'all are very much aware of everything happening and all that. So I'm sure I missed some timelines, so but yeah, I do bring these. I don't make light of it, but I do know that in the recent events, as I mentioned, Mary Jo, we hired I don't see this being an issue once you get past your 2024 or 2023. We'll see some of the same things that system did get in place like a year ago. So, I commend y'all for the time to find the right person, because I think it's between them before that weren't quite a good fit, but I think you're gonna be a good fit now.
I got some. When I got in late Sunday, I started reading this thing, and I reckon the word best describes it, alarming. And I'm glad you brought up these pages, facts of finding. And the remedy is the board implement certain plans. I don't want to point fingers, but I want to hold people accountable. They got a job, they need to get it done in a timely fashion. We can make excuses. Well, I'm gonna call on the board members here. We need to be more involved. I see Goldston's name on everything here and the board. So we're held accountable. So we need to meet with these department heads. I had a past board member, he was a town administrator. He met with them, went over checks, went over receipts. I never wanted to have that job because it took too much work. So I always passed on that position. But I think us board members need to be more involved with department heads, like Kevin told me some issues we're having with pumps. I'm glad he brought it to my attention. I know Bruce wasn't real happy when I'd go visit him. He just kind of shake his head, because here comes old Timbo asking these questions. And I think this board, if you read this report, maybe we need to get more hands on it. I've never received since '96 any factor finding like we just got on this report here, to my knowledge.
No, sir, there hadn't been, other than segregation of duties that I can recall, maybe an out of budget issue every once in a while, but you know, not making excuses by no means, but it's just been a unique series of events.
And you point out cross training.
Yes, sir.
We need more of that. We need more than this one person answering the telephone. Just, you know what I mean? We need more involvement. We need to check it out. We don't need one person doing everything. That's why we need one of our people, like a budget director, on the board here. So, I hope we will all take this to heart. This has never happened before. I hope it don't happen again. And thank you for touching that. I didn't know how you gonna handle it. You handled it very well on that being professional.
Appreciate it. I mean, it was good work. You know, Sean kept it on the front of his radar, but unfortunately, that type of person, that position is very hard to come by. And y'all have known that firsthand, and we deal with that with all the audits that we all statewide. That's the number one problem is if you're going in a hiring position or hiring process, it's very difficult to find that right person. And there's other outside agencies that come in and help, but it can be extremely expensive. But you know, talking about the board, if you look on the last two pages, 2022 implemented the local government commission's financial indicators. We put in financial information when we are finishing up the audit and for the submission to them, and it spits out this little Excel spreadsheet. Those things that are in pink mean that we do need to come up with a corrective action plan within, I think, 45 days. And then each one of y'all will need to sign that, and then we submit it to state. That's just a confirmation to the submission that y'all are aware of it. Y'all are taking it seriously. We do have a corrective action plan. It's not anything that's any different than I do on 75% of our audits. There's always some kind of issue that we have to address. And I'll be glad to work with Sean and his staff to get up the right word. By no means an English major, that's why I put in numbers, so y'all can get them. But are there any other questions? Again, I thank y'all for your concern, for getting all it done, and I'm glad that, you did everything done, even though it is here in tax season, but, our manager and Wilson will get the 23 resolved, and we'll have that next meeting.
Sean, is Brian aware of the financial software system? Have you had any discussion with him that we're set it up?
On that note, I'd just like the opportunity to address some of the findings in this report. And I think it's first and foremost, it needs to be stated that 2022 was a difficult time period for this town. Primarily staffing concerns. There was also some issues on working with external contacts on collecting and generating some of the data required in this audit. It's not entirely on the staff, but we do understand where we came up short. And I think the most important thing to point to the board tonight is that we have taken significant measures, not just to ensure this never happens again, but to correct these findings and do so in a way the LGC is supportive of. We've been in contact with LGC throughout this entire process. This is not news to them, and it's certainly not anything that comes as a surprise. But again, just to kind of emphasize and point this out, bringing in a position like a finance director in the form of Mary Jo Lennon, we've done 2 audits in 6 months. So staffing does play a big part in this, and having the correct staff, and in turn, having the correct separation of duties, the correct internal control measures, the correct day-to-day operation procedures. These things help moving forward. So again, just to reiterate, this is 2022. I want to remind the board of that. These findings are findings that we did take seriously and that we did implement corrections, bringing us to present day.
But getting back to the software, I'm not spending your money, but I think that's an area that needs a little bit of attention, because there's a lot of manual things that have to be done, especially when it comes to a bank reconciliation, that if it wasn't so complicated or so time consuming, it would have been done. So it is a process, and Mary Jo and can certainly attest to that and explain a little bit more detail.
It's always good when you hire your staff from your account, from your CPA. Sure, he's real happy.
And we're looking to,
From you, okay, good.
It's hard to find staff.
It is.
and we're looking to have, I think, the 22-23 that will be within 60 days.
Yes, sir. And it's been similar findings, the system wasn't fixed. But, like I said, looking 23, 24, it'll be in good shape. It'll
Yeah.
be sooner anyway. Unless, who knows, on our turn. Might lose staff and we'll be looking at this thing again in December, or who knows.
Well, and let me say from the other side, your firm has been very helpful. We've had for many years now a good working relationship with y'all in our town. Continues to have a good working relationship with you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And so I think with y'all working together with us, we should be able to get everything straightened out very quickly.
Yes, sir.
One final question. Was some of those deficiencies related to, I know as we go into these next sewer projects and water projects, I saw where you had the funding for 3 days. Can you just tell us a little bit more about these individual projects and how you account for those?
Well, how we,
When we take the money in and you're saying it's got to be dispersed in basically 3 days to the vendors.
right. And normally the process, and Sean, please correct me if I'm wrong in it, but you got an architect or an engineer that's going the whole time. So once that contractor presents the bill, they go through it, approve it, make sure they're in whatever percentage completed, as I say, and everything is done accordingly. So then that's reimbursement request is sent to the state. When the state reviews it, they send it back, you get it on today, you've got 3 days, so by Friday, all the vendors have to pay. And I think there were 4 checks that the vendors were after those 3 days. But I mean, it's not like the vendors will knock on the door, it was some gross and negligence or anything like that. It's just contractors know dealing with towns when reimbursements come, sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not. It was just a kind of a fact of life there, maybe. And it seemed like there was one that had an issue with trying to make sure it was done completely. I think there was some contractor and the engineer were disagreed on some.
Was that the Hickman?
No,
No, the Hickman, but that will happen. from
Yeah,
time to time.
so
That,
it's
you
a
know,
process to say the least.
They want their money, but we don't want to pay it out until we're sure that we have things resolved with them.
I mean, I'll take that violation any day to give them the money and not get it fixed.
Right.
I would agree.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, if you'll go forward with item C. Oh, I'm sorry. We do need to adopt, officially adopt the 21-22 audit as presented.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Sean, if we take item C at this time.
Sure. The item C on the agenda is a stormwater plan presentation, and we do have with us right at the nail here tonight, Amanda Hollingsworth, the stormwater engineer that helped us on the project to present. Real quickly, I'd like to say first and foremost, thank you to the planning board members that came tonight to listen to the presentation, and thank you for their input at the last planning board meeting. That was very valuable in crafting our final plan here that will be presented tonight. I'd also like to give just a little bit of context before Ms. Hollingsworth gets started to just inform the board, remind the board that this plan started off as more of a master plan, but quickly it became evident that we just simply didn't have enough money to create a master plan for the town of White Lake. So in the funding source being Golden Leaf, we had to adhere to the Golden Leaf funding rules in the plan that we created because it was their grant. And we ended up with a plan that is an economic development driven plan that focuses on flood mitigation and stormwater control. And in that plan, I'd say there's really three main areas, and Ms. Hollingsworth will present on these in her presentation, that include stormwater ordinance work. A lot of that was done with the planning board. Project conceptuals, which you have a copy of the presentation in your agenda, but they'll be on the screen as well. And the third category was the tie-in to the streetscape plan. So that as we continue to develop a series of plans, they all work together, and most importantly, they all increase the avenue for the town to pursue funding to complete the plans, so that we're moving forward and not putting a plan on a shelf and basically wasting our time. Having said that, this plan at the end, the staff will ask for adoption from the Board of Commissioners, and it's critical that the Board of Commissioners adopt this plan so that funding can start being pursued. There are several things. In fact, Commissioner Hilton talked about one earlier that we are actively working on, and I would just draw the attention to the board that this is a grant developed plan that is targeting grant dollars. Having said that, Ms. Hollingsworth, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sean, for that introduction. Appreciate you guys taking the time and hearing from me today. Throughout, I will be motioning to Pam when I need slides changed as well. So we'll be working together on this. But as Sean had mentioned, this is the Golden Leaf Foundation funded stormwater management plan. Oh, sorry, we're working through some technical difficulties. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Appreciate the heads up early on. All right. Yep, we can start here. As Sean mentioned, this is a grant funded project. It did not require any match from the town at all, and it was funded through the Golden Leaf Foundation Flood Mitigation Program, and the town had submitted an application for a planning grant and had been awarded $82,500 to complete the plan. And from the Golden Leaf Foundation for their flood mitigation grants, they would like planning to kind of develop, they would like communities to develop plans to address flood mitigation in the community as well as that. All right, and we can move forward. All right, and one more. Yep, thank you. So as part of this project scope, we had a couple main pieces. The first one was document review and research, which included looking at peer communities. One thing I would note is that even in the application, the town had included the fact that they are interested in water quality and kind of partnering that with the flood mitigation water quantity issues. And even this document research and being able to look at peer communities was a bit unique for the town. I had not seen that in the other Golden Leaf planning studies that I have been working on and talking to. So that was something that the town was able to get that is a little bit more unique and cater to your specific local problems. So that was the first piece. The next piece was doing survey on stormwater infrastructure within town limits and a little bit outside, especially near that White Lake Drive, 701 intersection, just to help aid in understanding where some of that water is flowing. And so that was a big piece, and we can kind of go over the results later. Then we moved to a watershed analysis, which was basically looking at existing conditions. And this study really focused on surface flooding. So basically when the rain falls and it's just flowing over your yards, your streets, your parking lots, really focusing on that piece of it. I know there's a lot of the lake management studies going on, the ongoing investigation into the water quality, as Sean had discussed earlier, the groundwater investigations and that additional study. So this is to supplement that piece. This is not to supersede that. This is going to be in addition to that. So any type of lake, groundwater, any of that information could continue to be taken from the lake management plan itself. So this piece is just an addition to all the other studies going on. And after we looked at existing conditions, developed a few concepts, and moved through the report. Yep. So as I mentioned, there was an inventory collection piece of it. Again, we could not hit every part of town, but we were limited to the budget and limited to the amount of money we had in the grant, but tried to really focus on understanding, specifically looking at the more commercial area where we have a lot of curb and gutter. You see a lot of those inlets, trying to understand what is out there so that town staff actually knows what to maintain. The outlets into the lake were collected as part of that lake management study. So that was not included in this plan because that data had already been collected. And the format of this data is compatible so that anything that is going on from the water AIA standpoint that will allow town staff to view data in the field, this data is compatible. So we're working towards, getting a complete stormwater inventory. Again, this is just the first step. You don't know what you have until you get out there. So now we kind of know how much budget got us for a certain section of town, but this is compatible to start building that town asset inventory for staff and citizens to know what's out there within the town limits. So we ended up collecting 85 structures. So that's any of those manholes you see out there, any type of inlet, and then over 200 pipes. And that included getting elevation data and size data on anything they saw. Again, they really stayed within right of way, just to kind of focus on things that are a little bit easier to maintain, even though some of that might be NCDOT right of way. So trying to starting to get a complete stormwater inventory that is compatible with the other inventories that the town is addressing. So the next step was an existing condition watershed analysis. So for this plan, really focused on understanding the drainage areas, understanding the soil types, understanding what surface runoff would be generated. We reviewed the lake management plan finding and studies to understand what they had already found in previous investigations. We also had asked and gotten a previous analysis study from NCDOT that I believe they had looked at the kind of northern portion of White Lake Drive in about 2017. So they provided us that data as well to investigate. So the images that you see up here, the one on the left is just the elevation data. And the one on the right, you can see we identified the different main watersheds where some of it is going east, away from the lake, away from the town. And then you have this other portion specifically in the northeastern kind of quadrant near that kind of northern portion of White Lake Drive, where we have significant drainage area, that surface drainage that is moving towards the lake. Those are also the areas where we have more of that impervious, that concrete parking lots, commercial areas. And those large drainage area also have the opportunity to be developed. There is more open parcels, there's more open land. And as some of the rest of the areas around the lake are kind of fully built out, you already have your residential properties around there, and some of the drainage areas going to the lake. That area kind of in that northeast really has the greatest opportunity to be developed or changed in the future and have potentially increased flow due to development. And with some of that potentially creating an adverse water quality situation where you get surface water that has those nutrients, the nitrogen and phosphorus, that if untreated are just going to increase what is going to the lake from that surface runoff. So when we were working with the town staff to develop concepts, as Sean mentioned, we were trying to pair something that could be economically driven with these concepts. I know it was mentioned earlier that, you know, even the simplest of projects nowadays are not cheap. Even adding stone or maintenance for ditches, it's expensive. And we want to make sure that if we're doing something as the first step, something that we could potentially partner with other opportunities to make it more enticing, that we could get a grant application, funding source, and maybe something that isn't just a stormwater related funding source. Especially if you pull in other pieces, you might have other opportunities to kind of expand that grant funding pool to other types of grants. And one of the big things is too, when you talk about flood mitigation, a lot of people think like, okay, let's just put it in this big pipe and get it off the road and move it down to the lake. But especially in this situation, we do care about that water quality that we are picking up and then piping into the lake. And so all of our concepts, we've wanted to include storage and water quality treatment components. So that way we're really trying to improve the water quality of the surface runoff to kind of add to everything else that's being investigated and all the other efforts that are going along with the lake management plan as well. So we are focusing kind of both on the flood mitigation to meet that grant requirement and then adding that water quality component. And then as far as the concepts too, I mentioned that we wanted something economically driven, but also try to kind of think of the individual constraints that this particular community could have. I think one is just space. When you talk about storing water to treat it, you need space. And that is a little bit difficult with the limited easements, limited right-of-way, limited town-owned property. You know, especially as the engineer, it's always nice when you see a nice, a town-owned park right there that we can suddenly convert and pipe all your water there to treat it. Because it makes it easy that you're not disrupting private citizens. You have something that you own that you can automatically kind of convert to address this need. And another thing too, especially when we're trying to think of moving something into the lake, I know you guys are aware you have these flat areas, and to get water to move someplace underground, you need a difference in elevation. And we are somewhat controlled about with the lake elevation and the outlet pipes there, especially with a lot of them on private property. And just knowing that, especially further down the road, that is going to be one of those design challenges, because you only have a certain elevation that you have to tie into at the end, and everything else has to back into that and still fit underground. So just trying to be cognizant of some of the things that are going to come up, knowing that there's still a lot of other efforts that can be done in the meantime as far as maintenance. So as far as the concept, yep. As Sean had mentioned, we kind of called it Concept 1, Area 1, and it's a little misleading because we list kind of a stormwater park or a recreation facility, but the main part of that concept is the recommendation that the town look into acquiring some type of parcel or partner with someone who has a parcel. Because again, when you're thinking of water quality or storage or treating, what you need is space. And so for this proposed concept, we were thinking that this concept could be somewhere in that north kind of eastern quadrant near that large drainage area for the intersection of White Lake Drive and 701, where we get a huge amount of drainage area where we're getting that surface runoff that's going to the lake. And there is space and opportunity to actually treat some of that. And there's that opportunity that if any of those empty parcels around it get developed, then we have something in place that could be used to help mitigate or offset some of that in the future, while still encouraging development, still encouraging growth in the area, where there is space to do that. And the second one is kind of pairing this with a streetscape project. I know that there was the recent streetscape master plan kind of for this commercial corridor near kind of the southern portion of White Lake Drive. And, you know, as part of that streetscape plan, they had identified opportunity areas. And I know there's a lot of things you could do in the opportunity areas. One of the things they had recommended is that it could be used for water quality treatment. And so what we did was we looked at this streetscape master plan, overlaid it, and looked at opportunity areas where we could include increased water storage and treatment, especially if you already have something in the works, you're open to doing a streetscape plan. These are the types of projects where if you're already going to be changing the roadway, potentially digging stuff up, repaving, that's when you want to put pipe in the ground or install things, is when something else is already going on. It's just as that cost saving benefit that you can do two things at once. And the last thing that we'll kind of hit is policy considerations. As part of that document research, we really looked into what are other lake communities doing, what are coastal communities doing to provide both lake management strategies as well as potential regulatory guidance that could be implemented or adjusted to fit your particular needs. So we can move on. So going kind of back to those parcel developments, I think that's the best way to call it. One option, and the photo is from an example project that we did a couple of years ago at this point in Morrisville, where what you're looking at is kind of taking a small sliver or small parcel or opportunity area and creating a pond that can provide storage for flood waters and also treat the water. And with this, they have like a little walking trail around it, and it creates this public amenity. You kind of make it a park, and it adds that benefit to the community, while really you're having this pond here that's trying to help your stormwater issues as well. So we looked at that and kind of taking our calculations by putting kind of an oversized pond in an area, we can get those reduction in peak flows, and we also get reductions in the nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, by kind of developing this and rerouting flow in these areas to the pond to store. And the next option, as far as kind of that parcel development, again, this is not us saying that, oh, the town needs to go out and do a recreational facility. This example is just showing that kind of no matter which direction to kind of add benefit, if someone wants to know what you're doing with the parcel, it's nice when you don't just have a big hole in the ground, which is basically what a wet pond is. It's a big hole in the ground. But if there are other opportunities to partner with external companies or people who are looking to develop, we have kind of this example where you can have permeable turf, which then you basically use that to treat stormwater. So as things are developed, we kind of had a test kind of example. If we had certain turf materials, if we added ponds on site, had different types of amenities where you kind of spend that little bit of extra to have that stormwater component, you get that storage, you get that treatment, even though you've developed and added an amenity to the community. And I think, yep, that one. And then for the streetscape plan, again, right now you need storage in areas to put in any type of treatment, even if it's underground. So this is one example of, you know, some type of green stormwater control measure, green infrastructure that, you know, some of the street drainage can go into this nice little swale before it gets into the system. So we looked at the streetscape master plan, looked at that asset inventory that was collected and identified areas where those opportunity areas could tie in nicely to the existing infrastructure. Again, areas where it's already low, there's already some drainage there that could be maintained, that could be tied into. And with this, again, really just trying to build on everything that's already been done by the town. If you're going to be potentially buying parts of property to increase your right of way, if you're going to be investing in this area, changing the layout of the street, adding sidewalk, having construction equipment out there, we think it would be a good opportunity to then add in this additional feature to treat the stormwater as it goes into the system before it goes to the lake, especially because there's already curb and gutter system out there. So it could be something like this. I've also seen where you basically have a tree, but underneath the tree, there's where you have your storage, where your treatment, and then the tree roots can suck up the water. So there's a lot of different options. But again, just trying to get storage and treatment and finding areas where we could kind of fit that in. So I think one of the big things that, really impacts is what is the cost of all this? Like if we're going to do this. So I would say that first, when you look at the cost, know that even when we're proposing a cost for the stormwater park, again, it is a little bit unknown. It's at a planning level. And also it's not like we went out there and purchased a lot for anybody. So obviously costs are going to change a little bit depending on if a site is selected, if the town decides to move forward with something like that. The location of that pond is going to impact, the total drainage area that gets there. The size of this space is going to dictate how large of a pond you can have there. So there are a lot of factors that can change. Even the same with the streetscape plan. I know for that cost, we were just shy of $1 million. But again, when you think about adding this in, if you already have construction crews out there, you already have people digging up the street, you already have other stuff going on. The stormwater stuff, yes, it gets expensive, but it really just becomes a line item in a more expensive project. And so trying to partner it with that. So I think both the development projects we had kind of estimating over $1 million just based on our assumptions that we outlined in the report. But again, really try to identify things that we think could score well for grant opportunities. And I know I'll kind of hit this at the end, but even, for example, the FEMA brick grant, they've added additional points for ecosystem benefits, which is still fairly vague, but if you have an empty parcel and you're adding a nice pond and you're treating water, that's all ecosystem benefits, especially if you have, other types of open land or agricultural land, within your drainage areas. That really scores well. Adding public benefit really scores well to, help provide these amenities to your community. So all of these things are really just the first step to say, hey, let's do something that looks good, scores well, has this economic benefit while still storing water, treating water. And then there's other opportunities to continue planning, do more neighborhood scale stuff later on as we move, but really just trying to identify areas for storage and treatment as that first step. And so even as far as the policy considerations, we have the peer communities listed up there. Some are like lake specific communities. Others are coastal communities. And with this, what we really did was kind of did a comparison and contrast of some of the requirements, regulatory or not, that we included in there as options for the town if they wanted to enact an ordinance or other types of measures. We did not want to say you had to do this specific type of ordinance because even an ordinance, you have to commit for someone on staff to actually enforce it. Or if you say that every plan has to be reviewed to meet this requirement, like those are resources. So we didn't want to say you had to do something, but wanted to present different options. So that way you can see what other communities are doing and what might be a good fit. And even with that, I know there was a previous draft ordinance that had been provided as part of one of the previous grants, more associated with the lake management plan. So even with that, having something as a base is always a good starting point. And now we have this list of recommendations that could be taken from these other communities, kind of piece together what you like, whether that's development requirements. I know one of the recommendations we said is that there's communities that don't have ordinance requirements. They have recommendations or standards that say, hey, we don't require you to do this, but we really like it. And you get approved very quickly when you do this specific thing or do it in this format. So just providing those opportunities as a starting point to help give everybody a little bit of knowledge of what other people are doing. And I think even with the policy considerations, a lot of larger communities have defined maintenance programs, maintenance plans. again, all of that is time and effort on someone, but I think that's kind of a very easy first step of, as long as you're trying to maintain what's out there existing and getting water moving, that's always a good first step. So those were kind of where we landed as far as policy considerations and recommendations. Yep. And so kind of the takeaways is, you know, we have things out there, again, recommendations. We've talked with Sean quite a bit and the staff, so we kind of know what you guys are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, but you know, that's just a starting point for you guys to see, you know, especially on the policy side, what you like and what fits kind of the vision moving forward. As far as opportunities for funding too, I think that stormwater is something that's very easy to pair with other things, especially as you guys move forward with the water AIA. You know, anytime you're digging up the ground to do something, it's worth looking to see if your system could be improved, even if it wasn't identified in this. Again, just trying to pair it with something else, but reviewing that for funding opportunities. Like I mentioned, we outlined a few different opportunities that could be a good fit. I know there's already ongoing efforts to look at other funding options, but for example, I know we mentioned brick, that the FEMA brick, you can get millions and millions of dollars for construction. You just need to, work the system, score well to get that money. And so hopefully with this, with ecosystem benefits, with this water quality treatment, that tends to really score well and sets the town up to be competitive in the future to get construction dollars. And then, you know, once you have that money, you can move forward with design and construction. And I think that's pretty much it. Just like to reiterate, again, it was limited grant money. Ideally, we can touch everything, but this is a first step. And at least by having a plan, you can identify any more plans that are needed. But people love to see that you have something to start with as that jumping off point, and it gives you that boost to get that additional money. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions, or I guess, Sean, if you had any final input before questions. Okay.
No, thank you. This goes back to what we had briefly spoke about at the beginning of the meeting. I mean, these projects, these plans are all things that we can tie together with our sewer AI and our water AI to score. Sean and I have been recently working on that because we have been turned down for the sewer and water AI grants 3 times now.
At least.
And so, you know, by time, this is what we talked with Mr. Rogers with DWQ about, if we can tie some of these projects together, maybe we can score higher because our tax base is relatively high. And so a lot of times we get overlooked because of that. So I appreciate you bringing out that point.
I just got, you know, we concentrated in a certain area, and maybe that's the best thing for us to do. But you touched on something like neighborhoods, and now we have a place called Toll Cove and Timber Lodge. Maybe accessible getting land because that's a flooding area. I don't know if we'd even look at those subdivisions. A lot of water, we have floods, and that's prominent areas. I don't know if that's something, just kind of mix things up, mix the water up. Looking at those type of subdivisions, if it's easier to get people to work with us, because on White Lake Drive, easements and those type challenges are pretty tough.
Yep. And I know as far as the focus area for that, like I had mentioned previously, at least starting out, there was, I know there's documentation other places, but we did have to provide documentation that there were flooding issues in this kind of eastern portion to even get the grant to begin with. So there was history of documentation that there was flooding issues. As I mentioned, again, especially because we're thinking of, not to say that other areas are less severe or not, you know, deserving of fixing their stormwater issues at all. Again, was just also trying to consider that in these areas where we have a lot of that commercial development, we get a large drainage area that's kind of going right into the lake. We have more open land where that could be developed and cause issues in the future, was kind of where this one started. But like I said, that doesn't mean that there can't be other studies, or especially as the other plans go around. The nice thing is, even if it's not included in this particular plan, at least the assumptions and the outline of the grant is documented. So even if something comes up in these other studies or an opportunity in these other areas, you you can still say, hey, with the money that we had, we investigated this, but it did document that there's other issues throughout.
And one point of that was the reason we focused on that particular area was because that is where we have a lot of nutrient going into lake, could be from DOT, whatever. And then this gives us a pathway into treatment. And so it just kind of was the reason we picked that area.
So Dean, along that line, did the state give us permission to treat water? Because she mentioned treating it several
The
times.
state has not given us permission to do anything until we have these plans and these other plans that we're correlating together to submit with them.
But essentially a retention pond.
So yes,
Treat actively even without, supplementation because of just a natural, your nutrients falling out into the groundwater, essentially filtering.
and wetland grasses and things of that nature. Turtle Cove is actually, so in this, the hydrology is pretty good there because of all the open bayland in the back. So it's, if you look at nutrient from that area, it's not very high. But we also don't have water going into the lake there except during the hurricane.
Yeah. It seems that when the pH was tested of the water that went in at Liza's, that it was low. Is that documented anywhere?
Diane Larson has documented it numerous times in the past, that, actually it was kind of an odd finding when she was looking at the readings in there because we really weren't expecting that. But when it comes through all the vegetative sources that are there, it tends to lower the pH of the water that is coming through. So actually, even though we're getting nutrients in the lake from those areas, which certainly aren't helpful, and that we want to try to eliminate, it does lower the pH. That being said, it's not a significant source of low pH water. But Diane had brought that up a number of times, and we brought it up to the state.
So rather than a pond, what would y'all think of making it an open wetland?
Make it more an open wetland.
The property we're talking about.
I mean,
What property are you talking about? I'm not.
I was
she was
thinking,
just showing examples.
but do you know where it's going? The example?
No,
It was not a specific property. It was this is the general area where there could be space.
Yeah, I know where the culverts are under the road. So if we're going to try to keep that water from going in the lake as it is, then that land has to be somewhere around those two culverts. And rather than a pond, because
stormwater can be ran.
I would rather it be like a wetland because I don't want to invite alligators that close. And we have them in the area.
More likely to have an alligator in a wetland than you are in a retention area.
Yeah. Thank you would.
No, I've talked to a scientist about that, and they're very concerned that if there are, like our sewer pond used to have an alligator in it, and behind the prison camp, there are like 16 alligators, I think. Remember when one tried to cross the road in 2020? Yeah, there are.
Yeah, and I think
That's a concern.
the good thing with the plan is that, we stated assumptions in order to quantify things, to have data, because we needed to make an assumption, so that way we could show what the difference would be. But really, whether it's the pond or the wetland, depending on what location it could be, I think there's that flexibility in the plan where those decisions can be made based on what is the best fit for that particular location, and changing that, whether it's something else down the line, the plan at least is still written in a general enough manner that there's that flexibility if you're going after money and it's decided that you want a different type of treatment facility, that you'd have that.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions? If not, then what we need to do as far as taking action on this is was stated earlier by Sean and by you. we're not going to be able to proceed with pursuing any grant funds until we adopt a stormwater plan. And that's what we've got here. And of course, there can and will be changes depending upon, we're just talking about a concept at this point, but we're not going to get any grant dollars without having the concept there. And we'll have a lot of work to do to decide the specifics of what will need to be done, but we got to get the money to be able to do it. So that having been said, in item C, at this time, the presentation having been made, I would ask that we adopt the stormwater plan as presented by Withers Ravenel.
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Sean, if you will handle item D on our,
Thank you. We appreciate you a lot.
Thank you.
you'll handle item D on our finance software, we would appreciate it.
Yes, sir. On the finance software, the board may recall last month, I made a comment that the town was pursuing a new software package. We had actually written a grant application to do so. And you heard some of the reasons why tonight. And you heard me address those reasons after the presentation was made by Thompson, Price, Scott, and Adams. The town was successful in the finance software grant in the sum of $119,270. And what that entails is several years, 3 years of finance software licensure. It also will cover any transition costs into this program and any hardware costs associated with this program. So we're taking these steps and we're taking these calculated steps to continue to move the town forward. As we get more and more grants, as we get more and more utilities, opportunities, tax base, et cetera, that just compounds the job that the staff has to do, and in turn makes the need for a finance system like this much greater. So in your packet here and up for board consideration tonight is a MOA, which is a memorandum of agreement that just simply agrees to the terms of the grant and gives staff the go-ahead in implementing said finance software. The software package is by a company named Black Mountain Software. And if there are no questions, Mayor, staff would ask that the board adopt the plan. I mean, the grant.
And I do want to emphasize, we have approximately $120,000 in grant monies that's going to pay for at least 3 years at about $40,000 a year. And I think includes some hardware upgrades too.
Hardware transition, that's not all software costs.
Right.
That's A to Z, complete
Right.
rollout of the software.
And so we'll have that. And again, this addresses, just wanted to point out some of the deficiencies that we had in the audit. Part of our problem that we ran into was difficulty in securing some of the numbers and data that we needed, because we didn't have the software to do it without it basically being done by hand. And it took a lot of time to do it. And with this upgrade in software, we will be able to retrieve that data and accumulate it in a much quicker fashion. And we have discussed this some with Brian Scott and those folks there all on board with it. And so we're looking at that to help bring everything up to speed on that. So if there are no further questions at this time, I would entertain a motion that we approve the finance software MOU as presented.
I so move.
Motion second. Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. In item E, Sean, if you will take that, please.
Sure, we have 3 planning board members whose terms expired recently, and at the last planning board meeting, we did get a recommendation for all 3 of the candidates listed. Those candidates being Hope Campbell, Jonathan Langston, and Sky Moore. They're actually all 3 here tonight. If the board has any questions of their reappointment. But just to reiterate, the planning board did unanimously approve the reappointment of all 3 members for an additional 3-year term. So staff would ask that the board accept that recommendation from the planning board.
First of all, I want to say, Jonathan, you and Sky and Hope, we really do appreciate y'all being here. I know y'all all do this for the big dollars that you get for serving on the planning board, which is exactly zero. But the fact that you're willing to serve in this capacity, and it is a thankless job a lot of times. And the fact that you're willing to come here tonight to show your support and be on board with this is very important to us. And just want to let you know that we humbly and sincerely do appreciate what you do and appreciate you being here tonight. And with that being said, I would entertain a motion that we reappoint Hope Campbell, Jonathan Langston, and Sky Moore for another 3-year term.
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Saying aye. Any opposed, like sign? Y'all get another 3 years of fun. And as you can see from tonight, we've got some things we're moving forward with. It's going to require some planning board consideration. And so we hope, Wade, got you here tonight too. We hope to keep y'all very busy with what we've got going on. So again, thank you for being here tonight. Okay. The next item is we have a series of budget ordinance amendments and also resolutions that are in section 5. Each of these are separate ordinances and separate resolutions. So we'll try to move through these as quickly as we can. These are basically housekeeping matters that accumulate during the year. And as we get into this part of the year, we're moving towards the end of our fiscal year, which ends June 30th for municipalities. We're not on a calendar year by state law, we're on a fiscal year. And so since we are approaching that, we accumulate these during a year's time and try to bring them to you so that we can basically, for lack of a better term, balance our books, showing unanticipated receipts and expenditures so that everything comes up right on our audits. So it's kind of standard for this time of year, but we do need to adopt these one at a time, even though that's a little cumbersome. We have to have a separate ordinance amendment in our books and a separate resolution for each one of these. So I'll move through it, or more precisely, Sean will move through it as quickly as we can. And Sean, I'm going to ask you to take the budget ordinances to begin with. That would be for A through I.
Yes, sir. And I would just reiterate to the board, this is pitching and catching in finance. So having said that, we've got fiscal year 2023-24 budget amendment ordinance, 2024-01. It's a little tough to follow. This amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenue due to the reimbursement of an invoice from Womble Rental by ZMAC Transport and the sale of miscellaneous office equipment on govdeals.com. Staff would ask that the board approve the budget amendment as presented.
So moved.
Second. Motion second. Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign.
For budget amendment ordinance 24-02, this budget amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenue due to the reimbursement of a lost pager, refund for coverage for the first responder vehicle Suburban, and the sale of a set of turnout gear. Staff would ask that the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign.
For budget ordinance amendment 2024-03, this budget amendment is necessary to budget revenues and expenses to receive funds from Bladen County Fire District, receive the funds of the sale of the 1999 GMC Suburban on Gov Deals and the transfer from capital reserves for the 2023 Ford Super Duty first responder vehicle. Staff would ask that the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
For the next budget ordinance amendment 2024-04, this amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenues from the sale of 2 zero-turn mowers on govdeals.com. Staff would ask the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
For the budget ordinance amendment 2024-05, this amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated expenses for White Lake Multi-Use Path Phase 3 grant application, Christmas decorations for the water tower, the replacement of speed bumps that were removed during the White Lake Sewer Sanitary Improvement Phase One project, and the repainting of the town signs. Staff would ask that the board approve the budget amendment as presented.
Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign.
For the budget ordinance amendment 2024-06, it's necessary to budget the unanticipated revenues due to the sale of a water tank, 2 light towers, on third interest of a marked lift in the fire department, and a 1976 Dodge truck in the police department. Staff would ask that the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign.
For budget ordinance amendment 2024-07, this amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenues due to the sale of 6 generators, 1 trailer, 1 golf cart, and 2/3 interest of the lift on govdeals.com. Staff would ask the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign.
For budget ordinance amendment 2024-08, this budget amendment is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenues and expense due from towing fees occurred after our police vehicle impacted a deer, and the reimbursement that was associated with that from the interlocal risk financing pool. Staff would ask the board approve the budget ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, like sign.
And finally, budget ordinance amendment 2024-09 is necessary to budget the unanticipated revenues resulting from cashing in 35,000 points earned from the First Bank credit card use from day-to-day operations. The points were in turn used to offset the cost of the employee appreciation lunch at Christmas. Staff would ask the board to approve the ordinance amendment as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Next matter is the resolutions that are presented in item number 5. And remember, as we are going through these, when we reach E, that's the one that Sean and I mentioned as we did the original agenda adoption. And that's the one in E has the record retention policy, but that was not included in your listings. So Sean, if you'll take those resolutions one at a time, we'll vote on each of those.
Yes, sir. And just for some context to the board, these 5 resolutions are already existing in town policy. They're written primarily from a state purview as towns and municipalities in North Carolina typically fall under General Statute 160A. So these 5 policies are in conjunction with the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the town received. And these 5 policies are written from a federal purview, as those were federal grant dollars. Once we adopt these policies, they will replace the existing policies on file. The first policy is resolution 2024-13 and is an ARPA eligible use policy for the expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act 2021. Staff would ask that the board approve this policy as presented.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign.
For resolution 2024-14, this is a conflict of interest policy applicable to contracts and subawards for the town of White Lake associated with American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Staff would ask that the board approve the resolution as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign.
Resolution 2024-15 is a policy for non-discrimination to demonstrate compliance with the American Rescue Plan award terms and conditions. Staff would ask that the board approve this resolution as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign.
For resolution 2024-16, this is a policy for allowable cost and cost principles for expenditures in the American Rescue Plan Act and funds by North Carolina local governments. Staff would ask that the board approve this resolution as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign.
And finally, for resolution 2024-17, again, it is the handout you received tonight. This is a record retention policy, and this simply addresses the time of which the town is required to keep any and all documents pertaining to expenditures of the American Rescue Plan dollars and their projects. Staff would ask that the board approve this resolution as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign. Brings us to item number 6. If any of the commissioners have any items briefly that do not appear on the agenda, and again, we ask you to put these on the agenda if you've got something that's got any length, but there are any brief matters that need to be brought to the attention of the board. If not, under 6A is departmental briefings and reports as we contain in each agenda packet. And they are there for your review and for the review of the general public on a monthly basis. At this time, we're at the open forum of our meeting. It's 3 minutes per citizen. Anyone wishing to address the board would have the opportunity to do so at this time. You need to come forward, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to address the board. If there's no one to address the board on this, we do have a closed session tonight. So it's General Statute 143-318.11A6. And at this time, I would entertain a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to that general statute.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? If not, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. We would ask y'all to excuse us. We'll be in closed session. We will at some point come back into regular session and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Do we need to fill this out?
I got something in the past on that today. I don't even have a social security card.
Mike's on. If the green light's on.
Yeah, it is. All right, at this time, open the doors. Yeah, the doors open so we can. All right, we'll let the record reflect that the meeting room is once again open, and at this time, I would entertain a motion that we go out of closed session and return to regular session.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign, and we have been in closed session for around 10 to 15 minutes. There are no items to be voted upon at this time. With that having been said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor, indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. And let me,
To adjourn.
what day?
It's the 19th, it's the 26th, for the budget council of March.
It's why?
The 19th or 26th, so next Tuesday, or the Tuesday after that.
I will not be here this Tuesday.
You won't be
If that
here
matters.
tonight?
I won't be here tonight.
Okay, so
And
I'm good.
I mean, that date can change, that's just what was presented to the board.
at what time?
7 p.m.
Okay,
26.
26, and that's
I thought
on
you said
a
6:30.
Tuesday.
That's also 6:30 works better for the board, we can certainly do that.
Is that a Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're talking about Tuesday, the 26th at what time?
Anytime, 6:30, 7.
Time can you give,
Time,
Mike?
what time y'all want?
I can be here. I can be here by 6. but-
Earlier the better.
Yeah. Do you want to get any sandwiches or anything so we can come in and have kind of a
We certainly
working
can.
meeting? We've done that a lot of times in the past. So why don't we make it, I mean, 6 o'clock time will move. I don't care if we do it at 5:30.
That's good for me.
Y'all tell me what, 5:30 good with everybody?
What time?
5:30
5:30?
good, or is
Yeah,
that?
I can make arrangements.
Okay. I don't want to mess you up on your
No,
work.
no,
We can
no,
go
no, no, that's
All
fine.
right, well, let's do Tuesday, that's March 26th at 5:30.
As long as you feed me.
Yes, sir. And just to remind the board, this will be the budget retreat where you hear from all the department heads, and they'll be going through their list of organizational needs and requests for the budget.
All right, at this time, then, we will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting to Tuesday, March 26th at 5:30 PM for our budget session.
So moved.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. And before you leave, this is not a voting matter.